Welcome. It's good to gather again in the aftermath of Rosh Hashanah and in anticipation of Yom Kippur. I hope your celebration of Rosh Hashanah was sweet and serious, sobering and joyous. And in whatever form it took, I hope it was gratifying and satisfying in some way that felt right to you. While our minds are filled with the themes of this time in our Jewish year, I have been thinking about some of the major prayers of our High Holy Day season. It occurred to me that some of our prayers began as meditations on a theme or an idea or even a proposed plan of action. There is a widely accepted theory that the Shema began as a kind of mantra, repeated over and over, Shema Yisrael, Adonai, Elohim, Shema, 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 as a way of entering into the mystery and coming to understand something of God's unity. While no one knows exactly how the Aleinu prayer originated, Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, which is how we usually do it, it is quite ancient and rather ubiquitous. In fact, next to the Kaddish, in all of its various forms and iterations, the Aleinu is the most recited prayer in our liturgy. It is recited 3 times a day at the end of every single worship service, which happen morning, noon, and night, or afternoon and night. There is a folk tradition that attributes this prayer to the biblical Joshua at the time of his conquest of Jericho, which was the first battle that the Israelites fought in the course of their conquest of the Promised Land. Another tradition ascribes the prayer to the men of the Great Assembly. This was a group of Jewish religious leaders who, after returning to their homeland from the Babylonian exile in 539 before the Common Era, BCE, initiated a new era in the history of Judaism. The assembly was primarily a legislative and administrative council, probably a loosely formed representative body, which met for major edicts and decrees. It is thought that much of the Jewish prayer service assumed its current form under that assembly. The first written appearance of the Aleinu prayer is in the manuscript of the Rosh Hashanah liturgy by the Babylonian Talmudic sage by the name of Abba Arika, known as Rav, sometime around 225 of this era, of the Common Era. It's very old. In Blois, France, in 1171, it is said that a number of Jews were burned at the stake for refusing to renounce their faith. They are said to have gone to their deaths bravely singing Aleinu to a soul-stirring melody which astonished their executioners. It is that melody, in fact, that plays a major role in its High Holy Day prominence. On Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the Aleinu is sung to a centuries-old melody that is much more appropriate to the weight and complexity of the words than the rather utilitarian melody we use during the rest of the year in a major key that moves us forward at a rapid and steady pace to the end of the service, and the oneg that in normal times awaits. That's the Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol. The melody we use on the High Holy Days is so old and universally accepted, if not beloved, that it is considered a Sinai or from Sinai melody. It's the one that goes, excuse me, Aleinu l'shabeach. In other words, because we do not know who might have composed the music, because it has survived since it was first sung as community after community embraced it, it has become such an expected and accepted motif of our worship that it is as if it was given to Moses on Mount Sinai with the Torah itself. Another melody that fits those criterion and is considered a mi Sinai tune, a from Sinai tune, is the Kol Nidre. Excuse me. While the original context of this prayer was as part of the Rosh Hashanah shofar service, where it sets the tone for the section of the service called the Malchuyot, or the Kingdom of God, it was soon adopted in the Yom Kippur liturgy as well in the afternoon, just before the Avodah service that recalls the sacrifices performed by the high priest in the Holy of Holies of the temple on Yom Kippur. We reenact the dramatic ritual of sacrifices that was believed to renew life for the entire people of Israel. One of the most important lessons of the last year and a half is that it is truly on us, aleinu, to renew life for each other and for the world. In the Middle Ages, the Kabbalists ruled that the prayer should be included in all services and should end with the verse, "On that day, Adonai shall be one and God's name one." It also became the practice to stand when the Aleinu is recited. One reason for this is the nature of the sentiments expressed, envisioning God's rule over all of the universe. In addition, the first and last letters of the prayer, an ayin to start, a daled to end, spell the Hebrew word aid, which means witness. And it is appropriate for a witness to stand when testifying. In similar fashion, the Shema also contains the word aid or witness within it. Given all of this as background, and it probably is a little too much, forgive me, the prayer evokes a multitude of responses, not all of which are related to the actual words, which in an interpretive translation by Joshua Gutoff are as follows. It is upon us, aleinu, it is incumbent upon us to praise the sovereign of all and proclaim the greatness of the Creator who has set us among the other families of the earth, giving us the opportunity to see the world through Jewish eyes. Let the time not be distant, O God, when all shall turn to you in love, when all the brokenness in our world is repaired by the work of our hands and our hearts, inspired by your words of Torah. Oh, may all, created in your image, become one in spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. Therefore we bow in awe and thanksgiving before the one who is sovereign over all, the Holy One of blessing. This text gives us a great deal to think about. Let us pause for a moment and just think about the idea that it is upon us to praise the sovereign of the universe and what that might mean, what it might mean to each of us. Is it in words that we praise? Is it in our thoughts, our deeds, our interactions with others? What might it mean to offer praise to a being most of us cannot entirely comprehend? So let us take our break to breathe. I hope it hasn't been too long for you to wait to do that. We adopt our meditative postures. If we are sitting, to do so with a certain attentiveness and erectness, but not rigidly so, not with arched backs, just comfortably, both attentive and at ease. Let us rest our hands in our laps, and as we do so, try to let go of all of the tensions that we find in so many places in our bodies. And we might just take inventory of those places as we release our jaws, our shoulders. Even a little roll of them might be helpful. Our hands now hopefully open in our laps. Let us release our backs if we can, our legs, our feet that grip the ground, our toes, let's wiggle them a bit. And let us take that first full, deep, healing, restorative breath. We might hold it for a few seconds as we feel it filling us, all of us, with life, with strength, with vitality. And then we reluctantly let it go. But that is also part of this process, to let each breath go in order to inhale the next one, in order to inhale the next gift from God. Aleinu l'shabeach. We might just inhale. Aleinu l'shabeach. Aleinu. Al nu. It is on us. L'shabeach, to give praise. Aleinu. 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 It is on each one of us, but not each one of us alone. This prayer is said in the plural. It is on us together as a community to offer praise to our Creator and to constantly discover what that might mean. And the different meanings it can have for each of us as individuals, and certainly for us as a community. It occurs to me that even breathing in and out with an understanding that this is a gift from God is a way of praising God with every breath we take. One of the features of this prayer is that in its original translation, it identifies the Jewish people as chosen in a way that can sound elitist. It's not that we are any better than any other people, for we certainly do not believe that. But we, in fact, chose to bear witness to monotheism before any other group in history chose to do so. That was our special mission, and I believe the source of our longevity in history. We are witness to God's unity, which makes every aspect of creation, every human being, every living entity, God-given and therefore sacred. I would like to direct our attention to another part of the prayer, which in reality is somewhat foreign to our ideas of Jewish practice. We know it in Hebrew as Vanachnu korim umishtachavim umodim, meaning, therefore we bow in awe and thanksgiving before the one who is sovereign over all, the Holy One. Praised be God. Many of us bend our knees slightly and dip our heads in a kind of symbolic bowing at this point in the service. When it was first conceived, however, those who recited these words on Rosh Hashanah and then on Yom Kippur fully prostrated themselves upon the ground in humble deference and homage to the Creator of all. This tradition of full prostration was maintained on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in conservative and Orthodox synagogues, but as we might imagine, was rejected in the Reform movement as quaint or irrelevant or anti-intellectual. In recent years, more and more Reform synagogues have adopted the practice, and I would share with you one of my favorite rabbinic sources, Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt's reaction to the possibility when she first encountered it some years ago. She writes, I wandered into Rosh Hashanah services at Congregation Beth Israel. The rabbi there, a new guy named Jeff, did something startling near the end of the service. He invited us to get down on our hands and knees with him. This wasn't something I'd ever heard of before, and it startled me into paying attention. The custom he introduced me to that year has become my favorite part of High Holy Day services. The Aleinu is the closing prayer of every Jewish worship experience. It begins, it is incumbent upon us to praise the God of all. The prayer expresses fervent hopes for a time when the power of God's beauty will sweep away idolatry, so that the truth of God's presence will repair the world. Powerful stuff. Fairly early in the prayer, we sing, we bow low and prostrate ourselves in thanks before the source of all sources, the Holy One, blessed is God. Most of the year, when we chant those words, we offer a kind of symbolic bowing. Not so on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. On those days, we actually prostrate ourselves, knees first, then hands, then forehead. I like to approach religion intellectually. I like my brain, and I trust my brain, and I know how to use my brain. But the first time I tried prostrating myself during the Great Aleinu, the experience went right past my brain and hit me somewhere far more profound. She continues, this summer, I learned a little drash on the word melech, meaning king, an interpretation. It can be read as an acronym for mochin, meaning mind, lev, heart, and kishkis, guts. In other words, God's sovereignty makes itself felt through our minds, our hearts, and our bodies. My first prostration was the first time I consciously prayed with my body, and it was overwhelming. I barely registered the rest of the prayer. Some part of me was still on the ground long after we had risen and moved on. One of the purposes of prayer, to my mind, is enabling us to climb the ladder between ourselves and our source, to move through the worlds of action, emotion, and thought, and into the world of essence. Not all prayer works that way, and prayer has other purposes too. But the davening that reaches me the most is davening which moves me out of my limited sense of self and into connection with something greater. Prostration during the Great Aleinu moves me that way. It's a physical experience that I can carry with me. If I'm lucky, it will enrich all the little Aleinus I'll pray in the year to come. So let us pause to breathe and to imagine ourselves at some point going all the way down to the ground to offer our innermost longings to the source of our very being, to what we identify as the creator of all. I invite you, if you wish, to do this meditation while sitting or lying on the floor, perhaps not face down, but face up in contemplation of a different way of approaching worship. Let us breathe. Let us breathe in and acknowledge that breathing in and noticing it and staying with the breath as it fills our bodies, in its restorative nature, is a way of praying with our bodies. We are already doing it. When we bend knees during services, when we bow from the waist, we are already using our bodies to demonstrate our involvement, our intention, our belief. To go down on the floor may seem quite radical to some, but is really just another way to feel God's presence and to offer our prayers. The idea will resonate with some, not with others. And that is all perfectly fine. Under any circumstances, I invite you just to breathe in our presence in this moment. Our presence knowing that it is on us, all of us, as we breathe in. And try to breathe out any sense of isolation. Even as we may be physically isolated from others. Aleinu, it is on us. It is incumbent upon all of us. By way of conclusion, I would offer these thoughts from Rabbi Jeff Goldwasser, the original source of Rabbi Barenblatt's introduction to the practice of prostration during Aleinu. I find the prostration to be a beautiful practice. When I lead services for the High Holy Days, I invite members of the congregation to find a place in the sanctuary where they will have a small piece of floor in front of them so they can prostrate along with me to the prayer. Even when only a few people do the prostration, it signals a moment of tremendous power for the whole community. Think of it this way. Yom Kippur is the day when we make ourselves completely vulnerable before God, and more importantly, before ourselves. This is the day when we own up to all the things about ourselves that are difficult to admit. It is not only hard to admit our sins and mistakes, it is also hard to face the very nature of our existence. On Yom Kippur, we look into the abyss and admit that our lives are temporary, fleeting, and largely futile. There is no better day of the year to lay yourself flat on the floor and give up all your pretenses and conceits. This is our day to be spiritually bare and admit that the things we usually think are so important, our accomplishments, prestige, learning, and wisdom, are just a facade we use to convince ourselves that we are something big and important. The truth that Yom Kippur comes to teach us is that we only matter to the extent that we live our lives in service to something greater than ourselves. We have an obligation to do that. Aleinu, it is on us. Everything else is window dressing. In just a few hours, Yom Kippur will begin. The day is long and it grinds us down. It is meant to. This is our day to accept upon ourselves the obligation to see ourselves as we really are, to lay down our egos, fall flat on the ground, and awaken to the highest within ourselves. I invite you to spend a few more moments breathing in and out, either from your seat or from the floor, in whatever posture speaks to you and works for you. I wish each and every one of you, every one of us, a Gamar Chatima Tova. May you be inscribed and sealed for a good year. God bless. See you next time.